In 1880, over 100,000 lamplighters walked city streets at dusk, torch in hand, a profession as essential as police. By 1960, they'd vanished entirely. Electric light didn't just illuminate our nights, it erased an entire working class from existence. In 1880, a lamplighter earned roughly the same wage as a factory worker, steady, respectable, essential. Every evening across London, Paris, Berlin, and New York, tens of thousands of uniformed men climbed ladders with torches or tapers, igniting gas mantles in precise sequence. The work was rhythmic, solitary, and utterly reliable. A lamplighter in Victorian Manchester might light 200 lamps per shift. In Paris, the profession had formal ranks. Lamplighters answered to inspectors who answered to municipal authorities. The job required no formal schooling, but it demanded punctuality, courage on heights, and an intimate knowledge of every street in your district. By 1900, the profession had become woven into urban identity. Lamplighters appeared in Dickens' novels, in paintings, in the streetscapes of emerging cities. They were the invisible guarantors of evening commerce, courtship, and safety. Gas lamps didn't just push back darkness, they pushed back crime, or so the cities believed. They enabled theaters to stay open late. They allowed factories to run second shifts. They made streets navigable for women and children after sunset. The profession existed because cities had collectively decided that night was no longer to be surrendered to darkness. Yet lamplighters themselves left almost no records of their own experience. No union archives survive in most places. Few photographs capture them at work. What remains are employment rosters, pension records, and scattered reminiscences by people who watched them pass. They were the anonymous infrastructure of modernity, until the moment that infrastructure no longer needed them. But before we understand how they vanished, we need to understand what they actually did during those hours between dusk and midnight, and why one particular invention made their entire existence suddenly irrelevant. In 1882, Thomas Edison's Pearl Street Station in New York illuminated the first electric streetlights on American soil, and no one noticed the lamplighters watching from below. The technology was expensive, unreliable. The gas flame remained cheaper, more familiar, more controllable. For 20 years, the two systems coexisted uneasily in the same cities. Paris installed its first arc lamps in 1878 along the Avenue de l'Opéra. London followed cautiously, Berlin faster, but the transition was slow enough that lamplighters had time to plan, to organize, even to resist. Between 1890 and 1905, unions formed across Europe and America. The National Association of Gas Fitters in Britain lobbied Parliament. Municipal workers in Vienna and Prague demanded guarantees. They had reason for hope. The profession employed over 100,000 people globally at its peak, a constituency with political weight. Then, between 1905 and 1910, everything changed. The automatic electric streetlight arrived. Not merely brighter or cheaper than its predecessors, but autonomous. No attendance required. No ladder. No torch. No evening ritual. General Electric, Siemens, and smaller manufacturers raced to perfect the design. By 1912, Chicago began mass replacement. By 1920, most major American cities had followed. The rosters tell the story in brutal arithmetic. Lamplighter positions that numbered in the thousands in 1910 had collapsed to hundreds by 1930. Pensions went unpaid in some municipalities. In others, men in their 50s found themselves unemployable, their specific skills suddenly worthless. The silence around their disappearance was near total. No farewell ceremonies, No monuments, just empty niches where torches once hung, and lamplighters learning to become something else. Yet in the London Metropolitan Archives, there survives a single document, a petition dated 1908, signed by over 3,000 gas workers, that reads like a prophecy written by men who could already see the future approaching. That petition would go unheeded. The vanishing began not with a bang, but with a flicker. In 1881, Thomas Edison's Pearl Street station in New York City lit the first electric street in America, just 5 miles of lower Manhattan. By 1900, electric streetlights had appeared in Berlin, Paris, and London's West End. The lamplighters did not disappear overnight. Instead, they watched their routes shrink, year by year, neighborhood by neighborhood. In 1910, London employed approximately 3,200 gas workers. By 1920, that number had fallen to 1,800. By 1930, fewer than 400 remained in the entire city. The technology that sealed their fate was deceptively simple: the automatic electric streetlight. Invented in the early 1920s by engineers working for General Electric and Siemens, these lights used photoelectric cells, early light sensors, to switch on at dusk and off at dawn. No human hand required. No ladder. No nightly rounds. A single electrician could maintain hundreds of automated lights from an office desk. City councils embraced the change. Electric light was brighter, steadier, and crucially cheaper over time. Between 1920 and 1945, gas lamps vanished from urban centers across Europe and North America with startling speed. Berlin's last lamplighter made his final round in 1935. Paris followed in 1937. By 1950, the profession had become archaeological, visible only in the oldest working-class districts, and there only temporarily. The human cost was absorbed quietly. Most lamplighters were in their 50s or 60s by the time the lights switched off for good. Pension systems were inadequate or non-existent. Many had no other trade. Union records from the period, still held in the Brussels Labor Archives, document men requesting transfers, demotions, anything to remain employed. One document, dated 1932, lists the names of 47 retired lamplighters in Manchester who had applied for poor relief. But not every city surrendered completely. One place held out. When the lights went electric, 100,000 lamplighters didn't simply retire to comfort. They vanished into the machinery of survival. In London, Paris, Berlin, and New York, municipalities faced an immediate crisis: what to do with an entire workforce whose skills had become obsolete overnight. The answer was brutal and bureaucratic. Most received no severance. No retraining programs existed. In 1920s Manchester, former lamplighters took factory work, dock labor, street sweeping, anything that paid. Their wages collapsed from 25 shillings a week to subsistence rates. Some never worked steadily again. By 1935, the British government had begun collecting oral histories from aging lamplighters, partly from guilt, partly from nostalgia. One unnamed interviewee told a BBC recorder, "I knew every corner of my route like my own hand. Now I know nothing." The psychological impact was documented but rarely discussed. Night work had structured entire families' lives. Children saw fathers only in the morning. Wives organized around evening departures. When that rhythm stopped, domestic life fractured in ways newspapers didn't report. Yet the lamplighters had left something behind, something cities couldn't erase even if they wanted to. Their routes had taught urban planners where people actually moved at night. Their safety concerns had created the first systematic crime prevention thinking. Public lighting wasn't just infrastructure anymore. It was ideology, the promise that government could push back darkness itself, that order could be manufactured. Cities had learned to think in terms of total coverage, total visibility, total control, lessons borrowed directly from the lamplighters' methodical rounds. But one city, small, stubborn, and wedged into the Alps, decided the lesson wasn't worth learning. What remains of the lamplighters is surprisingly substantial, if you know where to look. In archives across Europe and North America, thousands of photographs document the profession at its peak. The Museum of London holds a collection of lamplighter uniforms from the 1920s, preserved in climate-controlled storage. The city of Paris maintains hiring records from 1850 to 1945, listing over 8,000 individual lamplighters by name. In Glasgow, Scotland, a single brass lamplighting torch survives in the Riverside Museum, marked with the initials of a worker whose identity has been lost. The cultural imprint runs deeper. Charles Dickens wrote about lamplighters. Robert Louis Stevenson's A Child's Garden of Verses immortalized them in 1885. The profession shaped how Western cities imagined public safety and social order, the lit street as a sign of civilization itself. What we learned, ultimately, is this: the lamplighters were not defeated by progress. They were erased by it. Electrification was inevitable, but the speed of their disappearance, from 100,000 workers globally to near zero in 80 years, suggests something worth examining. No transition programs, no pension debates in the historical record, no farewell ceremonies recorded, except in Sierre, where locals still remember the last lamplighters walking their routes in 1984. Today, automatic streetlights hum silently across every major city. They require no attendance. They know no names. We have gained efficiency and lost a profession, and with it, a particular kind of human relationship to the night. The question that lingers, the one historians still cannot fully answer, is whether anyone, anywhere, documented the moment when the very last lamplighter in the world lit his final lamp. The lamplighter's disappearance reveals how quickly technology can render human labor invisible. Another file is already open: the switchboard operators whose voices connected millions until automation answered instead. Subscribe to the archive to witness the workers history forgot.